welcome back to another episode of the Winter Hill Rewatch here on the Filmaholic channel. Today we're talking about two episodes in Season 6, and that's 608 and 609. 608 is called Our Life is Not a Movie, or Maybe, and this is the introduction to Julian Baker, one of my favorite characters of One Tree Hill, played by Austin Nichols. There's bits and pieces of different characters that I relate to, and while he's still not my number one favorite character, obviously Dan is, but Julian, I guess, would be the character that I would most relate to, given that he is a movie producer and really into movies, obviously. And definitely the highlight of the later seasons of One Tree Hill, in my opinion. And gives us one of my favorite relationships on the show. Leighton and Naley are fine, but I love Brillian, which we're going to get in this season. So, this episode originally aired October 27th, 2008, was directed by Peter B. Kowalski, who is the director of photography on the show. He, I think, started doing director of photography, cinematography for One Tree Hill in season 2 for some episodes, but if you remember the videos, there was a different cinematographer for the first 4 seasons, main cinematographer. But Peter took over the later years as the main cinematographer of the show, and this is the first episode that he actually directs, and he directs a total of 7 episodes over the course of the rest of the series. And it was written by Mark Schwann, of course, which makes sense, introducing a big character like Julian and a big plot line in this season, and really the rest of the series, because while we know the movie doesn't end up working out in season 6, it does become a show in the final season. So this little bit of storyline it planted really carries us to the rest of the series in a way, and even the future stuff. We know that even after season 9, that show kept going, Ravens. So, like I said, big thing is Julian, who is a movie producer, comes to town, comes to Tree Hill. He's wanting to make Unkindness of Ravens into a movie. Lucas gets the phone call, and he ends up meeting with Julian, who first shows up at the house. He just takes it upon himself to show up, and he really, really seems invested in this film. He is. That is true, but part of that is because of his past relationship with Peyton, which we get a tease of at the end of this episode, and is fully explained in the next episode, that he did used to date Peyton, and knew about this book from her, and finally read it and got really invested, not just because it was his ex-girlfriend, but just it's a great story and he wanted to tell it, and he felt like he was sort of part of it in a sense, even though that came after the book. But he wants to make this film. He meets Lucas. They go to a trick, have drinks, and they genuinely like each other. So he ends up giving Lucas more control than he probably should have, as far as like he wants him to be the screenwriter. So he's a screenwriter. He ends up giving him a producer credit too, while they're drinking. All this happens, and then Peyton obviously shows up a trick at the end, and you get that little cliffhanger that they have a past together. But that's the main part of this episode, and what makes it really good, in my opinion, is the introduction of Julian, and really getting a flavor of what that character is going to be, and his charismatic attitude as well. And Lucas is going around talking to people, making sure they're okay with the fact this is going to be a movie because they're in it. Of course, Nathan, Peyton, Haley. But then Nathan brings up the fact, hey, you need to talk to Brooke too, because she's pretty much half the book. So he goes to talk to Brooke, and Brooke's fine with it, which we know she ends up becoming a bigger part of this film as well, especially the show when that happens, but we'll get into that. So that's overall the big part of this episode. And then you also have the stuff with Brooke. She has Sam at this point. Sam's living with her. Jamie becomes sort of infatuated with Sam, thinks she's so cool, and he ends up wanting to stay the night with Brooke and Sam, and he does. And then I like Sam in general. I like her, and I like her storyline with Brooke. She makes terrible decisions. She ends up leaving and throwing a party at Clothes of Her Bros. Peyton's wedding dress that Brooke's been working on gets destroyed. She brings Jamie, which is the dumbest thing of all, with her to this party where there's alcohol. And Millicent ends up getting a call from the nosy neighbor across the street, tells Brooke about it, who is with Owen at the moment because Owen keeps apologizing, trying to get back in Brooke's life, after his dumb decisions in season 5, which I still don't understand if that was like a character decision with the writers team, or if that was more a scheduling issue with the actor. But anyways, they end up going to Close Up Bros, finding them there. And these are some really good moments with Owen, actually, before he makes further bad decisions in an upcoming episode, because it's really get to see like that he is caring and protective of Brooke and will do whatever. I don't know. It's just part of that thing too, where it's like you don't really know how you want to write the character. I feel like the writers team, because they write him pretty well up until the mid-season finale, which at that point you're wanting him to look bad because you want Julian to look better, which I'm fine with, but it's just some of the decisions you make in terms of Owen are sort of questionable, and I don't know if that was part of just a writer's team decision or if it was the fact that, hey, he's not going to be around because he has contracts and other obligations, so we can't keep him in the show that long, sort of thing. Slam Ball is also a big part of this episode. Obviously, a couple episodes ago, Nathan decided to join the Slam Ball team, so in this episode, he is playing Slam Ball, and Haley and Jamie too, but Jamie's more excited about it until the next episode. But Haley is really afraid of Nathan playing because she's afraid he's going to get hurt again. And she keeps making faces and whatnot, so he jokes about it with her later in the episode while she's playing music, and he keeps making the faces. She's like, I can't play when you're making faces like that. He's like, well, I can't either, which is a good point, and you just, really at moments like this, I really love to see with the Haley relationship, outside of them just having problems, just like average marriage like scenes is cool. I like that. But that's really 608, and then we get into 609. Also, by the way, throughout all of these episodes, I'm not going to focus too much on that until we get to the mid-season finale, but Gigi's causing problems with Mouth and Millie. She is flirting with Mouth, giving all these different signs. She wants to sleep with him, trying to get drunk, all this, just causing problems, which, ultimately that's going to come to a head in the mid-season finale, which I think was a poor choice, honestly. I'll go ahead and say that. It's one of my least favorite storylines in this season, because I really, honestly, I liked Millie up until the mid-season finale of the season, and what Mouth does is not right, by any means, but what she did is worse, and less forgivable, and for me, watching the show. I mean, obviously, I do like her to an extent after that. Like, I'm glad that they end up together still, but just, this makes me really dislike her, the choices she makes, and then it's hard for me to like her again, especially with her getting more front and center attention in future seasons, like season 7. I don't care, because I don't care anymore after the decision she made in this season, if that makes any sense. But the other episode I'm going to talk about here today is 609, Sympathy for the Devil. Good song, by the way. But this aired November 3rd, 2008. This is a big episode for me because, one, I really like it just in general with the dance stuff that happens in this episode a little bit. But also, while they were filming this episode is when I went to Wilmington during the first half of season 6 with my dad. And I found out they were doing this Cucalouris Film Festival. I don't know if I'm even pronouncing that right. I've never actually been to the festival or heard someone say, I don't think, unless it was back then, and that was so long ago that I don't remember. But they were having this film festival they had every year in Wilmington, but they were doing a special Q&A with One Tree Hill to raise money for the festival. And the Q&A consists of this one guy, I don't remember his name, but he also appears in this episode as an extra at the Slam Ball game, as well as playing Carl in season 2 of the Carl's Crab Shack. So he was there. He was actually the moderator for the episode and did the Q&A, and it was supposed to consist of excuse me, Paul Johansson, Chad Michael Murray, James Lafferty, and Greg Prange, who is a frequent director and producer on the series. At the last minute, James Lafferty had to cancel. I'm not sure what he ended up having to do, but he wasn't able to be there, so it was just Paul Johansson, Chad Michael Murray, and Greg Prange. But that is beyond enough for me. I was so excited, really wanted to go. I think the tickets might have been like $40. I can't remember. My mom couldn't go, but she paid for me and my dad to go. We went, and made a night out of it, and it was just so awesome. I remember getting there early. People were, already were waiting, like diehard fans like me. We get into the room, and it's the room at the front of Screen Gems, actually, which I went into later as well in season 9 when I was an extra. It was a holding room for the extras, which I'll talk about with that too. And I don't know if I have pictures of it. I know I have some pictures of this event, but I don't know if I don't know how many pictures I have. A lot of it's on my old laptop, and I don't have access to it right now. It's at my mom's, and it's over 3 hours away from where I'm at. So, but I think I do have the picture with me and Paul, which I may put in this video. I may not. I haven't decided yet. If I do, surprise. But I'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, got to go to this holding group room. We're all waiting. This is where the Q&A was going to happen. Everything's set up, and I remember they had a deck. I don't know if that deck's still there, but the deck was attached to the building, and I remember looking out the door and seeing Paul Johansson and Chad Murray arrive and walk up on the deck, and it was just, even though I'd seen Sophia in the distance back in season 5 when they were filming that episode, I know it was her because of how she was dressed and in the episode, and that's kind of how I caught onto that. But it wasn't up close, so it wasn't as surreal. But seeing them through that doorway, it was just unbelievable and so surreal as a 13-year-old, seeing two characters you've been following for so long and so invested in, just in person, was incredible. And then, obviously they came in and they did the Q&A, and for some reason my dad always wants to be at the back of things. So we were at the back of the Q&A, unfortunately, instead of at the front. But we were at the back, and it was still amazing getting to hear all of these question and answers. I don't know if you could record. If you could, I wish I had, because I would love to go back and rewatch this. Just to hear some of the question and answers. Because I'm trying to remember. I don't remember much. I remember they asked what their favorite cuss word was, and that Paul said flatulence, and somebody said fuck. I think it was either Chad or Greg Prange, but yeah, like a bunch of questions in regards to the show, just random questions like that one, just all kinds of questions they would ask, and it was really just a great experience for me. Greg even talked a little bit about Dawson's Creek, because he'd worked with Chad on Dawson's Creek before One Tree Hill, and it was awesome. Now at the end, I was 13 and I was scared to death as far as like talking to one of these actors. Just so nervous. My dad was there too, and he didn't push me to go talk to anyone. He, was there to support me, but he didn't push me up to the front. And I didn't know, because now if this had happened, I would have pushed through and got to the front of both lines and met Paul and Chad this night, and it would have been great. I don't even know if Greg came down and took pictures with people, but if he had, I would have took pictures with him too, because I ended up having, the more I went to these not events, but like filming, and when I get to the finale of season 6 and then beyond, the next times I came back, I learned, and I do this now, I learned to push through and get to the front of things, to take these opportunities and get photos with people and meet them, because these are once in a lifetime opportunities, sort of. So you got to take advantage of it, and you got to push through, and that's what Hollywood's like too, and that's another thing I've like learned to do. And like, as far as when I move out there, you got to take these opportunities, you got to push yourself and get to the front. You can't wait around and expect someone to come to you, because it's not going to happen. Because I didn't get to meet Chad Murray that night, unfortunately. They both came down for photos and stuff. One was on one side of the room. Paul went towards the door where the deck was, and Chad went on the other side where there's another door. And I had to make the decision where I wanted to go, which line I wanted to get in first. I want to go try to get Paul or Chad. Most people probably would have went to Chad's line, because he was the star of the show and the bigger name. Dan's my favorite character though, so I'm like, I'm gonna go get a picture with Paul. So I got in Paul's line. By the time I had got my picture with Paul and everything, Chad was gone, unfortunately. So I did not get to meet Chad that time. I did meet him later, so I'll talk about that when we get to it in season 6. But I did get to see him in person, which was awesome. But I didn't get to meet him. I did meet Paul, however. I waited over there in line, and after everyone had already gotten their pictures and everything, and I was still scared to push myself forward, even though he was already taking photos with everybody. Um, Finally, at the end, not at the end, he was still talking. He was more conversational at this point, just talking to people while he was drinking. And he looked around, and we made eye contact. And I don't know. I want to say that he knew that I wanted to take a picture, and I was nervous to do so because we made eye contact, and then he was like, "Has everyone that wanted a photo? Just want to make sure before we keep talking. Like, does everyone have their photo and everything?" And I pushed myself and came forward and was like, hey, can I get a photo? And he was just so nice, super friendly. Honestly, though, I can't say anything bad about any of the cast members that I met. They were all super friendly and nice to me, as well as all the other fans that I've seen. I've heard stories about certain people, but they were all incredibly nice, and I have nice things to say about all of them. And when I talk about each one that I met, I'll talk about my experience meeting them. But Paul was so friendly, and I met Paul again at the end of this season. But he was so friendly, and asked me my name. I told him, and he said, "Hey, I'm Paul," and we shook hands, and he said some other things, and then we took a photo, and when we took the photo, he said, "Put your hand around my throat," and I'm just like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, put your hand around my throat." So I put my hand around his throat like I was choking him, and he used his fist like he was going to punch me, and we took the photo like looking at the camera like that, and it was incredible. I wish, because I was 13 and I was a chubby kid, that I looked better in those photos because I would show them off more. Because I looked like that in the season 6 finale too, and we had some awesome photos with that too, because he kind of did something similar with that, and we'll talk about that. But just an awesome guy, incredible, and we stayed there until he ended up leaving, and just like listening to him talk, and that was a really great experience. But that happened while they were filming this episode, because Chad was actually wearing to this Q&A the same clothes that he wore in this episode, the gray sweater and the jeans and everything. So that was really cool. But like I said, it aired November 3rd. It was directed by Bradley Walsh. This is one and done for him. He only did this one episode. It was written by Mike Daniels. So the big thing about this episode is actually Dan and Lucas. Lucas is writing his screenplay for the Ravens movie, and the beginning skips 3 weeks. So he wrote the screenplay, but he didn't write the scene where Dan kills Keith. And Julian's like, "Hey, you need to write the scene. This is a very, very important scene for the film." And Lucas is like, "Well," like, he doesn't want to do it. And Julian's like, "Lucas, you got to write it, or I'm going to find somebody else who will," to be blunt. So Lucas, throughout the episode, is trying to gather answers. He talks to Nathan, which that's a great, incredible scene too, where Nathan tells Lucas his favorite memory of his father, and it's meeting Michael Jordan, and how Dan was supportive of Nathan there and made him calm and feel okay to talk to Michael Jordan, which just going to Paul and like how he was when I met him, and I just thought of that. That's incredible. But a little bit of real life goes into the show there, but he talks about his favorite memory. I love that, and just kind of gave me chills like listening to him tell that story. But finally, and we also have this scene with Lucas in the hallway, and this is why I'm not a huge fan of Lucas in season 5 and 6, especially, I don't know, both seasons really, because he's very judgmental, and I understand why Lucas hates Dan, and I fully I understand. Like, I don't think that his character would forgive Dan no matter what, because he took Keith away from him and he murdered Keith, and that's why some people wanted Lucas to come back in season 9 for that one particular episode. I'm not going to talk too much about it right now, but I didn't want him to, because there wasn't a point for him to come back. There's no redemption between Dan and Lucas, and there shouldn't be. And as much as I love Dan, and I want him to get that redemption, for Lucas that's a situation where if you put yourself in those shoes, you're never going to forgive somebody if they killed your father. It's just not going to happen. No matter what he says, it's just not. It's not going to happen. So they have he's very judgmental with Haley in this episode about Dan and Jamie's relationship, and then he says, "Well, it's none of my business," which he's right. And then he also takes the shovel and beats the shit out of Dan's tombstone, which is not something that I feel like Keith would approve of, but he does that. But my favorite scene of this episode is with Dan and Lucas on the river court. And Lucas is sitting there in thought, and Dan comes over and he says, "Hey, I got a call from the cemetery that somebody did a makeover to my tombstone. Anybody would do something like that?" Probably they told him it was Lucas. They probably saw who it was and described it. And Dan is obviously not going to press charges because what's the point? But Lucas asked him what happened in the hallway because he doesn't know. And what I love so much about the scene is, one, I just love the quote. And I'll just get to that in a second. So Dan says, I picked up the gun, or Keith was holding Jimmy, and I picked up the gun and shot him dead before he could say a word. Keith was a hero. Write it that way. Which, that is what happened. That's exactly what happened. But there's so much more to that he could have told Lucas, that Lucas could have put in the movie, that would have made the movie better. But Lucas wouldn't have wrote it that way because Lucas wouldn't have understand it, and Lucas would have probably lashed out in that scene if Dan would have because we get that scene in season 9 with Dan and Nathan, and it's incredible. It's the best scene in the series, my favorite scene, where Dan breaks down and talks to Nathan about everything that led him to that moment, and in that moment, and after that moment. But if he had had that sort of talk with Lucas, Lucas wouldn't have understood it. So instead, he gives the simple version like that. And then when Lucas asks him why, instead of going into all these details, he says, "Every good story has a villain, Lucas. I'm sorry, but I'm yours." And I love that quote. It's so good. Because it's true. It's 100% true. And even though Dan, I don't see Dan as a villain. I see him as a conflicted character, which Lucas doesn't want to write him as. That's how Lucas sees it, is that he is the villain. And that Dan's fine with him portraying him that way in the film. I don't know. I just think that's a really incredible scene, and one of the best of the season, honestly. But that's the main stuff that happens in here. You also have the stuff with Peyton and Julian. She's struggling to tell Lucas about the truth, about their past. But we do see flashbacks of their past, and it's really nice. It would have been cool to see actually that relationship play out. If there had been a 4.5 season or something, that would have been cool, because we only got, I think, maybe 3 scenes with Peyton and Julian, but you really believed their relationship in those 3 scenes, which is surprising that you made that relationship work in those 3 scenes. And then obviously the end of the episode, Lucas delivers the script to Julian and finds a picture that Julian still has of him and Peyton together in LA. And then he confronts Peyton about it at the end of the episode, and she says, which this line is awkward to me, she said, "We were in love." Which, I mean, they do say that in one scene, and you believe it, especially from the Julian part. I don't think Peyton necessarily meant it, which is why I don't know why she would say that to Lucas. And it seemed a little bit odd, that scene. But that's how the episode ends, and kind of leaves you like a little cliffhanger there. And Nathan also he's continuing the slam ball. This is the last episode in the slam ball arc. Essentially, we get a little bit of it in the next episode, but not like actually there. It's just on TV. But he's in this episode playing slam ball, and has an old rival from his college days who wants revenge on him, and he ends up defeating that guy again, and that guy pushes him through the glass and knocks him through it. And everyone's freaking out because you know what happened last time he fell through the glass, especially Jamie, and Jamie doesn't want him to play slam ball anymore. So this is his last episode playing slam ball. And the last thing about this episode is the Owen and Brooke stuff. He's trying to win her back and bringing her presents every day, and she's kind of leading him on. And it ends up with him in the car, her car, when she walks out to close her bros, and he's naked, trying to pull the same move that she did, but it doesn't work, and she kicks him out of the car, and his clothes is unfortunately in her car, and the cops end up arresting him because he's in the middle of downtown Tree Hill naked. And so then he comes and tells her he's not going to, you know, fight for her anymore, that it's humiliating, all this. And then she talks to him later in that episode too and says she might end up crawling back to him. And it seemed like I liked how they left on good terms, of they could continue their relationship or maybe not. And I think that's how they should have left it. But apparently maybe, I'm thinking maybe I don't know, because obviously this was filmed or written before it was filmed, so I don't know what the behind the scenes were. I wish they had handled the end of Owen's character arc differently, but they didn't. But that's 609, Sympathy for the Devil. The next episode, I'll be talking about 2 episodes, 610 and 611, so join me for that. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys next time.